Hi everyone, my name is Gio Rapacciuolo. I'm a research scientist at the California Academy of Sciences, and today I wanted to share some insights on how to increase the usefulness of crowdsourced citizen science observations for biodiversity research. If we go over to GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, we find that over 60% of species occurrence records in the repository are citizen science observations, and 6 of the top 10 datasets in terms of number of records are citizen science datasets. This represents a huge wealth of information on biodiversity. One of these amazing citizen science datasets is iNaturalist, which I will be talking about today. Briefly, in case you're not familiar with it, iNaturalist is developed at the California Academy of Sciences and includes a social network, phone app, and a community of volunteer naturalists who collect and identify biodiversity photos and observations over space and time and across the web of life. While iNaturalist observations happen throughout the year, it is often large organized citizen science campaigns which truly boost iNaturalist activity and the number of observations for certain areas, times, and taxa. An example is Snapshot CalCoast, which provided a lot of data I will be showing here, and is a statewide effort led by the California Academy of Sciences to document biodiversity throughout the California coast every summer. As you can see from this animation, Snapshot CalCoast, which has been running every summer since 2016, leads to huge pulses in the number of iNaturalist observations on the California coast. Given the volume and scale of citizen science observation, these data from iNaturalist and similar projects have tremendous potential to help monitor and understand biodiversity over large scales of space, time, and taxonomy. Therefore, it is important that we work to fully realize this potential and figure out how to make the most out of these data. This is where 2 California state agencies, the Ocean Protection Council and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, had the incredible foresight to fund a pilot project aimed at building the capacity to use crowdsourced citizen science data to monitor biodiversity across California's coastal and marine protected areas. This is the project I will be talking about today. The main question we set out to answer is, how can we make the best use of crowdsourced and unstructured citizen science observations to extract signals of biodiversity change over space and time? The main challenge here is that these observations, of course, cannot be taken at face value, but require a lot of curation and analysis, much like museum specimen data do. The main biases in iNaturalist data are uneven coverage over time, given the rapid increase in the cumulative number of iNaturalist observers and observations, uneven coverage in space, following the uneven density of observers, and uneven observation effort, based on the different behaviors and motivations of observers, with most observation events or visits leading to the opportunistic observations of a single species. As a result, we have spent a great deal of time developing a protocol, a recipe of sorts, to account for bias in crowdsourced citizen science data and extract signals of biodiversity change from the noise in these data. The protocol involves 5 steps: filtering data, aggregating data in space and time, borrowing strength across taxa, modeling the bias process, and integrating standardized data sources. In the interest of time, I cannot go through all 5 steps in detail here, but I will walk you through a few examples of some of the most useful approaches we found. First, we found that aggregating groups of iNaturalist observations to borrow strength across space, time, and taxa is absolutely key when analyzing these data. This means identifying a spatial, temporal, and taxonomic footprint to define discrete observations events, which then become the primary units of analysis as opposed to single observations. You can think of the points in the figure on the slide as individual organisms observed on iNaturalist, the shapes indicating different species. while the grid overlaid on top represents the spatial, temporal, and taxonomic footprint selected to aggregate observations into discrete observations events. As an example, we often aggregated all iNaturalist observations made by a single user on a given day within a 2-kilometer radius into discrete observations events. Doing so enables data users to characterize observations events based on attributes related to observation effort. For instance, this allows distinguishing the two observation events, A and B here, where visit A has generated a few opportunistic observations over approximately 20 minutes and 100 meters, while visit B looks a lot more like a comprehensive survey, generating more than 100 observations over nearly 3 hours and a 1-kilometer radius. Another key advantage of aggregating data is the ability to borrow strength across taxa. This means using data from taxa other than the focal species to help account for observation biases in the focal species itself by indicating overall patterns of observation effort and therefore highlighting potential false absences. For instance, let's say we're interested in the population trend of the ochre sea star Pisasterocracius. As expected, given the increase in observers and observations over time on iNaturalist, the number of observations for the species, in red here, is increasing monotonically and does not reflect the species' ecological process. However, what we really want to do is to also look at the trend in observations for a set of species related with the ochre sea star. That is, species that tend to be observed in the same places at the same times and by the same observers. This will help us take into account overall observation effort and minimize the noise in the data. When we look at observations of the ochre sea star as a function of observations of species associated with it, we get the proportional rate of observation for the species on iNaturalist, also known as the reporting rate. This trend now looks much closer to what we would expect for the species on the California coast, with a large decline in the species numbers due to the strong negative impacts of sea star wasting disease. So how reliable are these relatively simple trends exactly? We have begun to validate species trends derived from iNaturalist with trends derived from standardized survey data on the California coast, and have found that the proportional rate of observation on iNaturalist frequently captures species' true population trends. However, there are also many instances of disagreement between the proportional rate of observation on iNaturalist and standardized monitoring trends. We have begun to analyze the correlates of agreement versus disagreement, and preliminary results suggest that the higher the local population size, the larger the number of iNaturalist observations, and the more drastic the population's fluctuations, the higher the reliability of iNaturalist-derived population trends. Ultimately, crowdsourced citizen science data should not be thought of as a replacement, but instead a complement for standardized monitoring data. Fortunately, recent developments in point process modeling frameworks, such as the one developed by Vivian et al. And highlighted here, mean that users need no longer choose between these two data types, but instead can combine them to exploit their respective strengths. Using this approach, smaller quantities of presence-absence data from standardized monitoring surveys can help to pinpoint biases in presence-only citizen science data, while larger amounts of citizen science data can help to fill gaps in the sparse coverage of monitoring data. Doing exactly this, we modeled the density and distribution of a subset of rocky intertidal species on the US West Coast. Specifically, we integrated crowdsourced citizen science data from iNaturalist with standardized long-term monitoring survey data within a joint species distribution modeling framework, which also statistically accounted for known biases in iNaturalist observations. These models enabled us to estimate the density of a subset of species across the California coast and the relationships between their density and underlying environmental gradients. In this example here, we show that a pink volcano barnacle is found in higher densities in warmer waters and is therefore limited by minimum sea surface temperature at its northern range limit. As a result, our models also estimate that in recent years the species has experienced a northward shift in its northern range limit on the California coast. By navigating to calcoast.dob.bio, you can find out more about this project and the approaches we used, as well as interact with the outputs we generated. I will leave you with my take-home. Our work has begun to show that, when treated appropriately, crowdsourced citizen science data from iNaturalist and similar efforts can provide useful estimates of biodiversity change and can become a crucial biodiversity monitoring tool on the California coast and beyond. Thank you very much for your attention, and please do not hesitate to contact me with any questions. Thank you.